have the privilege this morning of introducing our speaker. So let me just get right to that, because this will be fun. Hang on. So Lee Behrns, what can I tell you about Lee Behrns that some of you should know or don't already know? He spent 28 years as a teacher, and he started as a teacher with Cornerstone Christian School right there. Right there was his classroom on the other side of that wall. And so he actually taught the last year Cornerstone Christian School. Maybe you never knew that. The school started in this building, and these hallways and these classrooms were the beginnings. And he was here the last year, it was there, and then all the years consecutively that it's been in his location where it's at now. So he spent 28 years as a teacher at Cornerstone. Several of those years he was vice principal. In the last 3 years he has been the principal of Cornerstone School. Now, these are some observations that he himself has made, so I'm not really dissing him too much to say these things, but last time we had him speak on a topic very similar to what he's going to talk about today, he had no gray in his hair or his beard, and he didn't need glasses. So maybe we should have got you more frequently than that. Next time, he'll be in a walker. Too far. I'm still being a bit Italian, sorry. Okay, and anyhow, the other thing is, if you see him up here and you didn't know him as a high school principal, maybe you know him as your lawnmower man. In fact, I think this has happened before, where he's actually got up or been in some capacity, and people just think he's the lawnmower man. So I asked him what's his tally at, and he said that over the last number of years, he's fixed 4,000, and this is a bit conservative, but at least 4,000 lawnmowers in the city of Moose Jaw. So,
well, some other things along with those, not just every lawnmower, but
yeah, and only a few hundred of them have been my lawnmower. So
yeah, you've been over quite a bit. Yeah.
I get frequent flyer points. So why we're bringing him up here is because we're in a series called Asking for a Friend. So we're asking questions that everybody's curious about. And he's got two questions that he's going to sort of tackle today, or two aspects to his answer about Christ. Of course, being in Italy, being in these cathedrals that are built about Christ, being in all these different things, it's incredible. It's incredible. But it brings us back to some very core questions, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And that is, did Christ really live? Did he really rise from the dead? Those questions are pretty central. They're not pretty central. They're absolutely central to the Christian faith. And so we've asked Lee to come and speak on this topic. I see he's got lots of family here to back him up or fact check him in real time. I'm not sure which.
Oh, they will.
Yeah.
They'll hit me from every direction when I'm done.
So I'm going to pray for him. Oh, let's give him a great hand first. Let's just welcome him. It's great. Yeah, Lord, I just echo scripture. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord. And I thank for Lee, and I thank you for the word he's bringing today. And I pray for our hearts to be open, our minds to be in gear, and for us to be receptive to learning. And also, I pray that this would, for many, if there's some, they have sort of a little bit of a question mark about some of these things today. These are the questions that they were sending in, or that they're glad someone did send in. That this would be faith boosting, and it would bring us back to even greater worship of you. Thank you for Lee. Bless him as he speaks in your name. Amen.
Thanks, Pastor Steve. Last week, to be honest, Pastor Steve, when he called me, we were talking about when I was going to speak, and he said May long weekend would be good, and then I think we decided on May 24th. But lots of times May long weekend is in the 20th. So last weekend, as I rolled into church, I instant panic and sweat, thinking, "Am I preaching today?" And I couldn't see Steve, and I couldn't see Chris, and I couldn't see Kurt. And then I was just soaked, because I thought they're going to say, and up next we have Lee speaking. And I had nothing. It was all back home, and I thought, well, I can go and make something up, and they'll never be asked back, I guess. And then all of a sudden, Kurt comes up from the back, and it took everything not to come up and just hug him. Thank you, Kurt. You got this one. And so, because the last time I spoke, Steve checked in with me a number of times, and previous to that, he checked in with me daily just to ensure I was ready. And now he put some trust this time that while he was in Italy, I would get the job done. So here we are today on the right day, and yesterday was a busy day in the garage fixing things, and I didn't have a ton of time to practice, so I would practice on people coming in. They'd bring their lawnmower and, hey, can you fix this? Yeah. Hey, do you believe Jesus was a real person? No, I don't know. Well, sit down, and my wife's in the car. You want your mower fixed or not? Like, you sit down and you'll listen to me. And so I would just practice. I'd practice each thing. Hey, you want your tiller fixed? You believe in the resurrection? Yeah, I do, because the last guy has been here for half an hour, so I'm out. So that was yesterday. I didn't get my practice and people in the garage. I have a couple seats there for old timers like to hang out. So for me, this became kind of a passion for me. In about 2003, my dad gave me a book called The Case for Christ, and he gives me lots of books to read. I'm the son who reads books, and the other guy farms, and so if I want the inheritance, I need to also do things Dad likes, and he likes reading, so I read, and then we talk about the books, and I get to bring meals to the farmers, and that's how it goes, and I feel like kind of David. I'm the lunch bearer. So I read this book, and to me, this book changed my life, because I'm thinking, up to that point, my faith was based on just the faith of my family. Okay, I went to church, I believe in Jesus. It's no big deal, and I wasn't really questioned up to that point, but I thought, man, and there's a lot of evidence, and if somebody is doubting, we need to share this evidence. So I took my knowledge, newfound knowledge, I went to the principal at the time, Dr. Falk, and I said, I got an idea. I'd like to start a Christian ethics class, maybe grade 11, and I want to do it all apologetics. I want to teach apologetics to kids so that they know when they graduate and they're hit in college with many liberal things, as I'll put it today, that they're kind of have a foundation or kind of a feeling that, man, like, I think what I believe is grounded on truth. And so we set out on this journey, and I see lots of kids here, and these guys were all excited for Christian Ethics Review, Javen and Judah, and if they fall asleep, it's because they've heard it all from me and their father. But for me, it was, okay, I got to bring this to kids. And so over the years, I taught math and physics and law and different things. And whenever I see kids now and come back alumni, the thing they say to me all the time is, man, thank you for that Christian ethics class. So, well, what about calculus or whatever? No, I never used it. Okay. But really, what does it matter, right? That the foundation of their faith hopefully was strengthened slightly by some of the stuff that they learned in class. So for me, that became kind of a point of, I got to keep doing this. And so even as the principal, I continue to teach Christian ethics class to grade 11s, mostly because I have it all prepared and it's really easy just to come in and teach. But it is still a huge passion. And so when Steve asked, again, he said, we got some tough questions coming up. And he said, here's some. And he listed them off. And I said, ooh, that one's really tough. Kurt can do that. That's super, super tough. Maybe Doug wants that one. And I said, I'll take the one on evidence for historical Jesus and evidence for the resurrection. Because to me, those are our key foundations. Did Jesus live? And did he rise from the dead? Several years ago, a group of historians set out to answer a simple question. What would it take to prove someone in ancient history actually existed? Because today we don't have, or back then, sorry, they don't have YouTube or pictures or any kind of evidence. So what would it take historically? They looked at famous figures, emperors, kings, philosophers, military leaders like Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great. They found something surprising. Actually, for many of these historical figures, the evidence is pretty limited. A handful of written sources, if more than one even, often written long after they died, and sometimes filled with bias or gaps in the story. And yet no one questions whether Caesar or Alexander existed. Nobody says, I don't believe Alexander the Great was real. We'd find that strange, not because we've seen him, but because historical evidence has always been there. But here's the remarkable part. When you apply the same historical evidence and these standards to Jesus and his life, the evidence is not weaker, it's way, way stronger. So why do skeptics still question whether Jesus was a real, actual person? As I was researching this, I put it into YouTube, just random questions, and there was a whole bunch of videos on top 5 reasons Jesus never existed, top 5 reasons Jesus is a hoax, top 10 reasons the whole Jesus movement is a lie. And so I'd watch some of them just to gain the other perspective. It was weak. Today I want to answer this question, not from faith, but from history. The Bible tells us, 1 Peter, to always be ready to give an answer for those that ask you the question about why we believe what we believe. And so for me, I spend a lot of time in a Christian setting at Cornerstone, but I also spend a lot of time out in the world. Play hockey, golf, play baseball, a lot of it with different people that maybe not Christians. And I'm always ready to give an answer if they ask why I believe what I do. Christianity was not built on myth or a legend. It's rooted in real events, real time, involving a real person in Jesus. 2013, a couple guys, Stephen Scianna and Charles Ward, wrote a book, and the book was called Who's Bigger? Where Historical Figures Really Rank. They evaluated each person, and I quote this because I couldn't write all these big words, by aggregating millions of traces of opinions into a computational data-centric analysis. They ranked historical figures like Google ranks web pages by integrating a diverse set of measurements about their reputation into a single consensus value. All that to say, they did a lot of research into doing this. They had to make adjustments, though, to account for modern popularity, because memories of Justin Bieber in this modern age are much more prevalent than Aristotle. But Bieber will fade into extinction, whereas someone like Shakespeare has been the bane of every child's existence. That's why I didn't teach English. I taught English 1 year in grade 9, and Dr. Falk proceeded to never schedule me for English again. In the end, though, the top three people they found, most influential people in the world of all time. Number 3 was Muhammad, of course, Islam. Number 2, Napoleon, wanted to take over the world. And number 1, of course, was Jesus. Jesus was number 1. No matter how you put the data in, Jesus was number 1. And, of course, Bieber, because I know Ron will ask me when it's over, Bieber was 8,633rd, Ron, okay? Still, it's okay to love Bieber. Now, these guys, just make sure to know, these guys were not apologists trying to win you over to Christianity. In no way. They were mathematicians and computer geeks just trying to sell a book. No matter what lens you look through, though, Jesus is the most influential and well-known person in the history of the world. But some still doubt. Before we talk any more about historical Jesus, let's look at how they come up with historical accuracy for any person. They ask 4 questions. Number 1, are there early sources? Number 2, are there multiple independent accounts? Number 3, are they consistent with known history? And number 4, are there outside confirmations? So let's take a little look at these. Are there early sources for Jesus? Well, we know the Gospels, Gospel Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were all written within decades of Jesus' life. And how do we know that? Because this is so important. If they're written within the decades of Jesus' life, we have eyewitnesses that can testify to their truth or not. We know Acts was written in 62 AD. We also know that Luke wrote Acts after he wrote Luke. So Luke was before that. And then we know that Mark was written before Luke because Luke quoted Mark. So we go back. We have Acts, then Luke, then Mark. And Mark is written so early, he mentions nothing about the whole destruction of Jerusalem, which gives a huge hint. I mean, your world just changed. Jerusalem is destroyed. The temple's gone. And you would write that in history if you were there when it happened. But it was written before that. He doesn't even include names of people as if trying to protect them. And he also doesn't include the deaths or how Paul, James, or Peter, who died in the 60s, died. There's a renowned atheist and historian, Maurice Casey, actually says Mark was probably written in about 40 AD. 40 AD, that could be 7, 8 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. Eyewitnesses everywhere. Public correction could hit. Public correction is allowed. These stories were lies. These were so early. They were so early. What did the gospel writers have to gain by writing these accounts? They didn't list their books on Amazon. They had nothing to gain. They just wanted to honor their Savior with the truth. The gospel writers were reporting real history and interviewed real eyewitnesses. Luke 1:1 says, when Luke's writing, Dear Theophilus, I'm writing to you to tell you the truth of what you've seen, of what I've seen. I want you to know what I've seen. Here's the truth. Here's what people have said. Man, Jesus is real. Were there multiple sources? We look at Paul. Paul is another source. Paul was written super early. In fact, he was written before the gospel. Paul wrote his letters before the gospels. Most of them were done. Then we look at all of Paul's letters. He doesn't provide much biographical information, but what he does is attest to many of the events. He's a contemporary of Jesus. He considers Jesus to have been real. Moreover, he claims to have met with James, the brother of Jesus. If he interviewed the brother of Jesus, man, was Jesus real? Yeah, he was. He was my half-brother. Couldn't stand him most of my life. Then I died for him. Paul states that he personally knew and interacted with eyewitnesses of Jesus. He personally interacted with these guys. Peter and John and family members. He met with all between 35 and 36 AD, a few years after the crucifixion, and got some direct information about his life from them. From Paul's writings alone, we can see the life of Jesus fulfilled. He descended from Abraham. He was brought up in Jewish law, had disciples, had a brother named James, lived exemplary life. He died, resurrected, crucified, put to death, brought to life. He was seen by Peter and James and the 12 with numerous quotations referring to notable teachings and events in the Gospels. The earliest Christians did not present Jesus as a myth or a legend at all. Peter and John and the others publicly preached in the very cities where this stuff happened. If they were inventing this whole story about Jesus in the cities where it happened, they would be shot down immediately. Not literally shot down, but shut down. Just said, you guys are liars. This is a joke. You can't preach like this. They took oral culture very seriously. There was people who actually were the story keepers who made sure that the stories were kept true in the oral culture. Thousands of contemporaries could have challenged. Paul also writes that many eyewitnesses were still alive when he wrote in 1 Corinthians 15. He appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive. Paul challenged everybody to check it out. Check it out for yourself. Check it out. This is an unusually bold statement if you're fabricating a lie. Compare this to Alexander the Great. And Alexander was number 9 on the list, by the way, whose biographies were written centuries after his death. Centuries. It was about 500 years after he died that Alexander's biography was written. No eyewitnesses. Where'd the stories come from? Legends could have developed, but we believe them. 100% truth. Everything could have been embellished and no one would have confirmed or denied it. Yet no one doubts Alex existed. Test 3. What about history? How does history line up? And Steve touched on this a little bit in a previous sermon. The biggest thing is using archaeology. Archaeology, there's a few major ones. Archaeology has recently uncovered the Pontius Pilate inscription. Before that, people thought Pontius Pilate was just discovered. He was just a fake guy that Christians made up until we discovered it. Pontius Pilate, he only appears in the Bible, big deal. But we found an inscription placing him exactly in the time and place of Jesus' death. They've uncovered bone boxes from the first century around the Mount of Olives. Get this, the names, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus on these bone boxes. Lines up pretty close to this story in the Gospels of Jesus hanging out with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And they had crosses on them. Why would you ever put a cross on a bone box? The most hated Jewish symbol of anything. Death and destruction, the cross. Unless the cross meant something more. It meant life. There was another burial box found that said on it inscribed, James, son of Joseph and brother of Jesus, 63 AD. This is getting pretty serious. This is real first-hand archaeological and historical evidence. And they found the site of Nazareth from the time Jesus existed. And they said that never happened. That was a made-up story about Nazareth. Every place in the Gospel of Luke, as a historian, Luke was accurate. They found it. No historian has denied it. It is something of absolute awe to see how accurate the Bible is historically. I put this into ChatGPT for fun. ChatGPT is OpenAI, and I basically use it to teach all my lessons. So I put this question into ChatGPT, and I said this: how many archaeological discoveries have contradicted the Bible? And this is what I got back from AI, and it just starts writing it out. If you mean, has archaeology proven the Bible is false overall, then no. Most historians and archaeologists would not say that. That's how I imagine the voice of AI. In fact, archaeology has moved in the opposite direction. Critics once doubted people like Pilate or places like Nazareth, but archaeology later confirmed them. Wow, this is AI. This is ChatGPT giving their answer from compiling evidence and documents and literature from around the world and through all time, bringing it together. And they close with this. Most scholars would say the Bible is deeply rooted in real ancient history and real geography. Many details have been confirmed archaeologically, but some events remain disputed or lack evidence. In other words, this is what I take from this. The Bible is pretty historically accurate. Even AI will admit it. And the last test 4, this was my favorite. When I read The Case for Christ for the first time, this is what blew me away. Because I'd never heard of this. The outside sources that talk about Jesus. So these are completely unbiased, existential, out there, not even in any way, shape, or form conforming to Christianity. These guys are writing history. So the first one I get was Roman historian Tacitus around 116 AD. He records that Jesus was executed under Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. Christianity was spreading quickly everywhere, and early Christians held to their beliefs. Pretty good, pretty accurate. Here's an outside guy, pretty accurate. Jewish historian Flavius Josephus in 93 AD referred to Jesus and his followers and his brother James. So again, backing up what we have in our Bible. He had wondrous power and a following, crucified under Pilate. Others like Pliny, 100 AD, he was a governor of Turkey, and Suetonius, a Roman historian, described early Christians worshiping Jesus and not denying their faith, even under torture. Could they have done this for somebody who didn't exist, for a historical figure that never, ever existed? Would anybody do this? Even from outside the church, we have evidence. Not one historical document from that era disputes the existence of Christ. Why then do we even give thoughts to any writings from thousands of years later, all these YouTube heroes who think that they have the answers? Why are we listening to them when right from day one, all our ancient historical sources are talking about Jesus existing? Jesus lived, crucified, started a movement. There's no denying that. No reason for non-Christian sources to lie. Despite persecution and no power, the message of Jesus spread rapidly. Early Christianity began in the exact region where Jesus lived. Opponents argued his claims of being God, but they generally did not argue he never existed. How do you explain the sudden growth of the church, the willingness of the followers to suffer, and the persistence of the movement without a real historical figure? The only reason for this explosion was because people were convinced it was true, and they saw it with their own eyes, or they knew someone who did. Even, you got a guy like Bart Ehrman. This is a shocking one. He's a former professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina. Bart Ehrman's written 30 books dispelling Christianity. But in all those books, he admits that Jesus 100% existed. He's an atheist and an agnostic. I can't understand this one. He went to Moody Bible Institute as a Bible training, all this, and then he decided that he couldn't explain suffering, so he said, I'm an atheist, agnostic, I'm out of here. But they kept him on as the professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina. Just imagine a teacher coming to me, Lee, I don't believe in teaching anymore, I don't believe in teaching children, and I don't like kids, but can I keep my job? I don't know. Can you fix things? Can you drive a bus? That's about it. I don't know how you could keep your job. How are you going to keep your job? I don't believe in anything anymore. Can I still be the dean of religious studies? Yeah, I guess so. We're a really liberal university. You can do what you want. He believed that that most of Paul's letters were authentic, and Paul knew James and Peter and was writing accurate historical accounts of the real Jesus. So all the opponents of Christianity say all Christians did was copy the idea of Jesus living and dying and getting all that from other pagan religions. But in the end, Bart Ehrman says, no, they didn't do that. Christians did not make stuff up. Jesus was real. I don't believe he was the Son of God, but he was real. And in his 30 books, he tries to dispel all the other stuff, but he admits he's real. There's no denying that this single life of Jesus has influenced the world more than any other person. We think about this, the calendar itself, BC and AD. Man, Jesus never existed. Well, why do we have BC AD? Well, it's actually called Common Era and before Common Era. No, it's not. You can't change that. You can pretend to change it. I make sure to always say BC AD. I'm not afraid. Billions identify as his followers. His teachings have shaped laws, education, art, and culture, and more sermons, songs, paintings, etc., about Jesus exist more than anyone in history. From the Roman Empire to the modern world, the message of Jesus has crossed all culture, language, and continents and continues today to transform lives. It's grounded in evidence. He entered history. He's not a myth. He's not a legend. He's a real person. Now, part 2, was he really the Son of God? And how can we prove he was truly prophesied Messiah, the Son of God? Well, that's what I'm paid to do today. The resurrection of Jesus. The resurrection of Jesus is either the greatest hoax in the history of mankind, because it's deceived billions of people over 2,000 years. It's the greatest hoax, or it's the greatest event. It's one of the most hotly disputed topics still today. If you go online to any, even like I said, YouTube, chat rooms, wherever you want to fight online, people will argue for and against the resurrection. It forms the basis of the Christian faith, but we know no one was actually there. No one was in the tomb except Jesus. We don't know how it happened. We don't know, did it happen? We got to look at the evidence. We got to piece things back together. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:7, we can have all the faith in the world, but if Jesus did not die and rise, our faith is useless. So we need to know, did Jesus rise from the dead? If not, what are we doing here today? We have to work backwards and try to piece the evidence in. We have to look at the resurrection backwards because we have to put the evidence together. And I think I want to start with this. The evidence, or the resurrection, is important for 3 reasons, 3 big reasons here. And number 1, I believe it was the ultimate fulfillment of prophecy, God's final stamp of approval on Jesus, the promised Messiah. He was who he claimed to be all along. He was so sure, Jesus was so sure he was going to rise, that he even predicted his own death and resurrection. No other major religion founder has ever done that. So Jesus was the ultimate fulfillment. There's 200 to 400 prophecies. There's 48 main ones that Jesus answered, and the chance of Jesus fulfilled, the chance of that is, they talk about, mathematicians have run it, 1 in every atom in the universe. It's just ridiculous when you run the math that Jesus fulfilled all those. The ultimate fulfillment. Number 2, forgiveness of sins. If Jesus is the promised Messiah, his death made atonement for our sins. How? He ascended into heaven, presented himself before God as the ultimate sin sacrifice, and then back down to earth. The sacrifice was accepted. It was like in the Jewish sacrificial system. The Holy of Holies, remember hearing the stories, the priest going in, they tie the rope to him just in case, and he'd go in, and everybody would be waiting, is he going to come out? And they'd put the sacrifice down, and if it was accepted by God, the priest would come out. If it wasn't, they'd have to pull him out with the rope. If he came out alive, it was accepted. Jesus came back alive. The sin sacrifice was accepted. And a little fun fact. Jesus exclaimed on the cross, "It is finished," at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the exact same time the Passover lamb was being sacrificed. If you think about that, God's hand and his fingerprint is on every tiny little piece of history. That is not a coincidence. That was how God planned it. And number 3, it offers us hope for eternal life and salvation. Jesus conquered death and dwells with the Father in heaven and promises us the same. There's now victory over death. You can see the disciples. They were on the run, scared. And if Jesus just appeared to them, still with his blood everywhere and the body and the shape he was in, I don't think they'd be proclaiming him as Lord, like, yes, I want to have a body like that resurrected. They would have gathered him as quickly as possible and taken him to the nearest place of health care. John 3:16 says, all who believe will have eternal life. God cannot lie. This is the truth. You believe, you will have eternal life and resurrected body. So while researching this topic over all the years, here's where the guys I've taught will remember some of these, hopefully. The 4 common alternate theories to the resurrection. So if the resurrection is not real, well, why? What are the reasons that people don't believe in the resurrection? What other theories are out there? So the top 4. Number 1 is Jesus never really died on the cross. He just fainted and was later revived by the coolness of the tomb. That's theory number 1. That tomb is amazing. I mean, you think about that. If you had tombs like that, we have an accident victim. You know, we could take him to the Wigmore Hospital. No, I got a cold tomb over here. Take them there, and they'll be healed up in 3 days. I'm not sure that would have happened. Because Roman crucifixion was down to a science. 39 lashes at least. Sometimes the crowd would be hyped up. The Roman soldiers would continue the beating. And lots of times people would die just from the lashing. If you've seen The Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson's portrayal is pretty accurate, with the flesh just being beat and torn. There was huge blood loss. We know huge blood loss. Hypovolemic shock had kicked in, which meant the body is just in panic mode. We have no more blood, and there was no blood transfusion. So Jesus is on the verge of death. Soldiers would be killed if their victim survived. This was not an option. They had one job and they did it well. They had to. I can imagine being a Roman soldier. My wife packs my lunch. Well, have a great day today. Oh, thanks. What are you going to do? Kill a few people and head to work and then come back. What'd you do? How was work today? Good. I'm still alive. All my victims died. Oh, great. What a life that would have been. But that's how they had to live their life. Every day that was their job. And if they didn't do their job, they knew they'd be killed. They did their job. A spear was thrust through Jesus' side where blood and water came out. There was no water left in his system. Proved death to the Roman soldiers because they knew there's two types of fluids that fill in around your organs when you die to try to keep them warm, protect them. And at the pericardial and peripheral effusion are the names of them, and that comes out as water. And the eyewitnesses saw this come out, knowing death happened. Heart and lungs were pierced. He was dead. How would he got, and let's say he didn't die, but he got out of the tomb, how would he walk on broken ankles or roll a rock away with dislocated shoulders from hanging on the cross? How would he get out? And why would the disciples worship a guy who was in the shape Jesus was? Secular historians even, Tacitus, Lucian of Samosata, and Josephus all said that Jesus died. He died. He died on the cross. There's no doubting it. Even skeptics will admit, like a guy like Bart Ehrman will say, well, they're not going to make up crucifixion for Jesus' death because it's the most shameful, humiliating, and associated with criminals. And if we're making up a story about our Messiah, we are not putting death by crucifixion. It's actually criterion of embarrassment in historical circles. People do not invent details to weaken a case. So he was crucified. He died on the cross. There's no doubt about it. He was dead. J.D. Crossan, founder of Jesus Seminar, basically went against everything. They called themselves the Jesus Seminar and argued everything about Christianity except the one thing he said. And he quotes, that Jesus was dead is as sure as anything historical can be. The disciples stole the body. This is theory number 2. The disciples stole the body in order to convince people Jesus was the Messiah. Where's the motive? Why concoct this elaborate plan and then die brutal deaths? Money, power, they didn't get any of it. Why make up a lie and die brutal death? How did they get into the grave? Did they bribe the guards? The disciples were just, young little guys. They would not have been guard-like material. How did they get past them? Josh McDowell noted that when a guard failed in their duty, he said they would often be stripped of their clothes, lit on fire, using those clothes as kindling. There's no way those guards would have let the disciples into the tomb. The disciples were in a state of despair. They never thought about stealing the body. They were all a mess. They were devastated. They failed. Rome won. They were scared and on the run, and they were hiding from all authorities. The disciples had no motive and no means. They weren't tough enough to go past the guards and steal a body. Why steal it? Why die for a lie? The tomb was sealed with Pilate's seal. Once that happens, if you steal a body, at that point, according to the Nazareth inscription, anyone who steals a body from the tomb, capital punishment happens. You're dead. Do not steal a body from the tomb. These guys had their whole lives in front of them. Steal a body for what? For what reason? And then, even then, where did they hide it? One of them would crack. Yeah, no, we hid it over there. Hid it over there in the field. Now we put it over there in a different cave. Just don't kill me. Bartholomew, about to be skinned alive, as one of the disciples, he would have cracked. You're about to be skinned alive and then killed. Okay, no, we stole the body. It's over there. Not one of them ever gave that up. It was a huge secret. I doubt it. They didn't have the body. And number 3, third theory was the women went to the wrong tomb. The women went to the wrong tomb. Now, all of us guys know women are pretty good with directions. And they would have ensured that if the disciples went to the wrong tomb, they would have put them in the right direction there. So I've never had to worry about directions in my life. Directions are given to me minute by minute. Everyone in Jerusalem knew where the grave was. Everyone knew where the grave was, especially the women. And Joseph of Arimathea was his grave. Even Peter and John would have known where the correct grave was. The Gospels actually tell us that 3 days before, the women went to the tomb. Luke 23:55 says, to anoint the body and help bury him. They saw the body carried into the tomb. Everybody knew where the tomb was. Seriously. A bunch of guards guarding this one, and you went to it's this one. And the guards are, well, he's in here, but if you want to go to the wrong tomb, go to the wrong tomb. I mean, everyone knew where the tomb was. They had to have gone to the right tomb. They knew where it was. And even if they did go to the wrong tomb, can you imagine they run back to the disciples, he's alive, he's alive, he's alive. 5 minutes later, some other authorities grab the body, march it downtown in Jerusalem. It's right here. Everyone went to the wrong tomb. 1 Corinthians 15 tells us over 500 people saw Jesus alive again. Paul tells us even, hey, ask them. These people all saw him alive, lists a whole bunch of names. Go ask them. Paul would never risk doing this in Corinth, right where all the eyewitnesses were. So, number 4. Oh, sorry. One more thing here. Did the simple mistake really lead to billions of people over the last 2,000 years by going to the empty tomb? I don't think so. Number 4, the appearances were hallucinations. So hallucinations only happen in individual occurrences. No two people ever see the same hallucination. That's a medical and factual sentence there. 1 Corinthians 15 again tells us 500 different people saw Jesus alive. Hallucinations won't be had by skeptics. Paul, Jesus' brothers, James and Jude, those guys, they're not going to hallucinate a risen Jesus. They had no reason to. Paul hated Christians. Paul hated the whole idea of Jesus. He's not going to hallucinate a risen Savior. His brother is the same. James and Jude, there's no reason to think my brother is a hero or the Messiah. In fact, they weren't hardly even around, even at the crucifixion. Jesus had to say, John, you take care of my mom. My brothers, I don't even know where they are. Hallucinations don't eat or talk, drink or walk. And hallucinations don't end suddenly after 40 days. Boom, 40 days it's over and the hallucinations were gone. Oh, is that the time where Jesus ascended back into heaven? And even if there were hallucinations, we still go back to this. Where's the body? If these were hallucinations, the body would have the tomb in it. We don't have the body. We never had the body. There's no body of Jesus to be found. Once again, I go back to ChatGPT and I say, dear ChatGPT, what are the alternative theories to the resurrection by people who claim it never occurred? Because I want to see what else is out there in the world. What would AI think? It listed all the same theories that I had. I had them first. I put them up there. So I asked Chat after. And then a couple other ones that were super lame that weren't even worth the ink to print. But in the end, this is what AI concluded from all the AI research in that moment. They said this: no alternative theory explains every piece of evidence perfectly. There is not one alternative theory. That's why the resurrection debate has continued for 2,000 years. This discussion ultimately involves not only historical evidence, but also deeper assumptions about miracles, the possibility of God, and whether supernatural events can actually occur at all. I thought, this is fascinating. They can't even dispel it because it's the truth. So then, I like to keep AI on my good side. I thanked AI for the help with my sermon. And AI replied, and this is so funny, I started laughing out loud, that they will be praying for everything to go well on Sunday. I thought, why, thank you. Thanks. And my wife, and I told her, and she goes, seriously, are you having a conversation with your computer? I said, yeah, AI's super nice. I said, we talked late into the night. But if your heart's touched today, Pastor Steve prayed, and so did AI. So get on there and thank. Oh, that was she's worried now. She's checking my history. How long have you been chatting with AI? Beyond these arguments, though, I believe the most compelling evidence for the resurrection, though, is the conversion of Paul and James and the changed lives of the disciples. Paul, we know, made his mission as Saul to hunt down and kill Christians, to end the movement. It was ridiculous. He was a dedicated Jew, and he said, it's not going on. Like this Jesus thing, he's a blasphemer, it's fake. We're not going with him. Paul spent his life trying to do that. He even was at the stoning of Stephen. He was so enamored, like, get that guy. Yeah, he's preaching and teaching. Get him. All of a sudden, he became the greatest missionary to ever live. Wrote all those letters. Preached, taught, gave his life. Makes no sense unless he encountered the living Jesus. And James, Jesus' half-brother. The Bible tells us he didn't think anything of his brother's claim to be the Messiah. In fact, him and his brothers mocked him. I can just imagine them beating him up, which seems weird. Jesus would have probably had power to just poof, take his brothers out. But he took they mocked him and made fun of him and embarrassed him. But all of a sudden, James now is preaching and teaching, dying a brutal death, willing to suffer for his brother. These guys had no reason to put their faith, none whatsoever, to put their faith in Jesus and die brutal deaths if Jesus simply lived, taught, and died. They had to have seen him alive. They just had to have. The death of the disciples were so brutal that they lived in constant danger each day too. 11 of the 12 died horrific deaths while preaching the gospel. None ever recounted their faith. They taught, traveled all over the world, no gain, just pain, suffering for their wives, children, families, relatives. After Jesus' death, the disciples were transformed. Instead of running away scared, they carried on in his teachings and were willing to go to their deaths, proclaiming he was the Messiah. We had Peter upside down on the cross. James was beheaded. Paul beheaded by Nero. Others were stoned, stabbed, sawed in half, dragged by horses through the streets. All faced death for their message. Man, you think, give up. Why not give up? Because what they saw with their own two eyes changed them forever. People don't die for what they know is a lie. Something might change. Something changed them. Something changed them. You might argue people die for their faith all the time. Look at 9/11. Those terrorists, they're willing to die. But the disciples were different. They didn't have to die for what they believed in. They were going to die for what they saw with their own two eyes. There was no faith needed. They didn't need to know if it was a lie or not. They saw with their own two eyes what happened, and they could choose, am I going to believe this and die, or am I going to recount my faith because this was a joke and we just made this up? They knew what they were dying for. They didn't steal the body. The 12 disciples knew they saw Jesus dead. They saw him alive. They ate and drank and learned with him. They were not part of some elaborate conspiracy to proclaim Jesus as the Messiah. Steve and I were talking when we were putting this together of the Babylon Bee. It's a satirical website on YouTube it's a Christian website. And so they said, what if the disciples, the death or the resurrection of Jesus was a hoax? And it's this video. It's a 5-minute video. I laughed out loud the whole time because it's the disciples around the campfire. And Peter's like, hey, guys, come here, boys, come here. I got a great idea. And they go, yeah, what is it, Peter? He goes, we're going to steal Jesus' body. Then we're going to claim he was resurrected. And then you got John, I'm tracking, yep. And he goes, and then we're going to die brutal deaths. And then all of them are, wah, woo. And John is, just run that last part again, that last part. We're going to die brutal deaths. Okay. Then he goes, hey, Thomas, man, you're full of doubts all the time, man. Help me with this. And Thomas goes, this is one thing I'd never doubt, dying for a lie. And it goes on and on. It's a satirical thing of really how ridiculous is this? And they say, John, really, man? Like, let's just do this. Why? What do you want to go die on an island or something? And of course, the foreshadowing. It's pretty witty. But it's ridiculous. In the comments after, I think there was 1,650 comments of people. Of course, you get some of the skeptics in there, but most of them, yeah, you know what? When you look at it from this perspective, for them dying for this, it is ridiculous. Like, we got a great plan. Let's get together, fabricate a story, steal the body, and die brutal deaths. And John's just, am I missing something? What are we doing here? I've shared this before, the 10 years ago sermon, with Chuck Colson, special advisor to President Nixon in the Watergate scandal. This is it's a good analogy because it was 12 disciples, 12 guys. So Chuck Colson served 7 months in prison and then became a Christian and started a prison fellowship internationally. Pointed out the difficulty of even few, dozen, 6 people, whatever, maintaining a lie for an extended period of time. And he said, I know the resurrection is true. He points out to all the crowds because 12 men testified they saw Jesus rise from the dead. 12. They proclaimed it for 40 plus years, never denied it, beaten, tortured, put to death, any brutal way possible. They would never have endured it if it wasn't true. Somebody would have cracked. Watergate, as he said, The scandal he was embroiled in, 12 guys, had the secret of Watergate, the wiretapping scandal of the presidential race there. They couldn't keep alive for 3 weeks. You're telling me 12 apostles could keep an eye alive for 40 years? The Watergate guys weren't even faced with torture. None of that. Death, nothing. No, just some jail time. No, it was him. It was him. And they're pointing everywhere. Try to get out of trouble. 3 weeks is all they lasted. Now think about this carefully. People may die for something they believe is true, but nobody dies for something that they know for sure is false. The disciples knew for sure. Secrets will leak, stories change, pressure exposes the truth. But the disciples, they never broke. They never changed their story. They didn't reveal a hidden lie. Instead, they held firmly under persecution and death. That doesn't sound like a conspiracy to me. It sounds like conviction rooted in something real, historically real. How did the world religion start? In the very place where all these events happened. If it was a lie, show us the body. The tomb was empty. 500 people at least saw him again. Two of the world's greatest apologists, Lee Strobel, Josh McDowell, were both adamant atheists. Both guys started off as atheists. Strobel wanted to prove his wife wrong when she became a Christian. He was a writer, Chicago Tribune, and he said, I'm going to make it my one-year goal. I'm going to write disproving Christianity and still make a living over here, but I'm going to write on the side disproving Christianity. Same thing with Josh McDowell. Josh McDowell set out to write a book, turned around, and it ended up being one of the biggest bestsellers of all time. Evidence that demands a verdict. He changed his tune after he got through trying to dispel Christianity. Turned out he proved it, and he said, it's right. These guys could not get past the resurrection. C.S. Lewis, also an atheist until he tried to refute the resurrection, and then he gave up. Said, I can't do it. C.S. Lewis, another famous writer. Dr. Simon Greenleaf of Harvard Law ran the resurrection through all the law tests possible. And see, would this thing hold up in a court of law? And boom, it did. And it was, in the end, the 12 disciples' actions, willing to go through torture and death. That sealed the deal. Harvard Law professor tried to disprove it. It's all the same conclusion. Jesus changed history. He turned the world upside down. There's no denying this. None at all. Did he change history because he was born? Nope. Because he preached for 3 years? Nope. Did miracles? Died on a cross? No, lots of people died on a cross. Jesus changed history because he rose from the dead and appeared to his followers. That has to be the only explanation. It just has to be. And because of this, we go back to the beginning. We have forgiveness of sins. We have hope for salvation and eternal life. We have salvation. We'll close with this little story. Steve, how's my time? I was warned by all my friends and family I had to be quicker than Kurt from last week, and he was deadly. 15 minutes is all he spoke. It was longer than that when you were gone. What's the time at? What's that? Okay. Every morning, the sun rises. No matter how dark the night is, light returns. The resurrection is Christianity's declaration that darkness does not get the final word. Sin does not win, death does not win, hopelessness does not win. The empty tomb and the resurrected Jesus is God's announcement that Jesus is exactly who he claimed to be. And because he lives, hope is alive for us. We sing that song, because he lives. It is. Hope is alive. We've looked at all the evidence. There's historical documents. Check those out. Non-Christian sources. Check those out. Archaeology. Check that out. Eyewitness testimony from that time. Checked it out. At some point in all of our lives, we got to stop asking, is there enough evidence? The question becomes, what are we going to do with the evidence? Because unlike buying a lawnmower, this is not a small decision. The decision we make concerning Jesus affects our life for eternity.